Do you like the circus? Do you like the circus? Do you like the circus?
Enter one, enter all, the circus of the bizarre.
We are definitely going to miss our interns and just thank them. Round of applause. Thank them for all that they have done and been a part of. And actually, one of our interns has gone in Mexico right now, helping build homes there. And so we've just been very thankful for them. And we're continuing today our brand new series, Not My Circus, Not My Monkeys, which was very cool to kind of open up last week and talk about and look at this premise of everybody has a circus, and whether or not you believe that you have one, you do. And sometimes the monkeys get loose, sometimes the clowns act up, sometimes things get crazy and it's lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And we go, what do we do with that? And not only how do we deal with that, but also how do we walk through jumping into someone else's circus? And we talked about how sometimes that's super difficult in our last week's message because we go, I have this circus and it's going crazy and I don't want to do and then all of a sudden we look at somebody else's and we're like, God, I hear you telling me that I'm supposed to jump in. And what we said last week is that we always need to ask and see what's going on in someone's life. And say, well, God, I don't want to ask because I got all this stuff, and if I jump into their circus, then my circus is going to go crazy, and then they're going to burn the house down and all this stuff. And so you just do you. That's not my circus. That's not my monkeys. I need to deal with me. And what we looked at is that sometimes, and more often than not, when we jump into someone else's circus, that we see that, man, not only am I able to help them, but then I can see, and it gives me better perspective in what's taking place in my own life. And more often than not, we see, man, my situation is starting to get a little more tame as I jump in and help someone else. And it is hard to jump into someone's life. I did student ministry, working strictly with middle school, 6th through 8th graders for 10 years as I started out with ministry. And I'll tell you what, I absolutely loved it. There's not many people that are like, when you set up the lines for like, hey, who wants to work with kids? They're like, cool, maybe I'm interested. And they're like, little kid, babies. Everybody wants to hold a baby. Well, some people do. Everybody's like, I'll hold a baby until I have to change a diaper here. And then like people are like, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, little kids and their imaginations, whatever. And then we get to middle school and they're like, crickets. Everybody's like, who wants to work with middle school kids? Did you say vacation? I want to do something else. Did you say whatever? No, I got stuff to do. I got to do my hair and do my nails, anything but that. And then you get to high school, like maybe that. But I loved working with middle school kids. And we had this teen service where they set up and tore down, because we were a portable church, their own service. And there were like 160, 180 kids that would come out every single week, and they led the music. And they like would come up and talk about communion and talk about offering. And really the only adult involvement was to oversee it, and then an adult would speak. And it was so cool to watch and see it. I started out ministry in an environment like that, where actually there were weeks that the middle and high school students outnumbered the adults in that church. And it was so cool to see, like kids would come and then they would bring their parents to church instead of the other way around, a parent dragging the kid. And so it was really cool to watch. And a lot of the kids hadn't made a decision for God yet. And every time we would pack up, tear down, and then we would go and get lunch and we'd hang out. And one day we were playing basketball with a bunch of middle school kids, and they're like talking trash, and everybody's sweaty and starting to get super stinky. And everybody's running around because middle school is that age where it's like, I know I'm starting to go through some changes, but I don't want to deal with hygiene. And so it's just kind of the way it is. And it's like, hey, I need to talk to you, a little thing called deodorant and showers. And so we're hanging out and everybody's playing basketball. And one of the kids, there's a couple kids sitting over there and we're playing, doing our thing. And the ball rolls out and out of bounds. And one of the other kids who had not made a decision for God yet yells at one of the other kids who claimed to follow Jesus. Like, it said, like, I'm a Christian, I'm following God, I've been baptized, like, I am going to follow him. I would say, you know, if someone would say you're a Christian, you go, absolutely. And the ball rolls by, and the kid who hasn't made a decision yet for God is still, like, checking things out, whatever, yells to the other kid, hey, can you get that ball? And he, like, looks right at him and doesn't even say anything. Just, like, looks at him like, whatever. Like, doesn't say a word. I'm like, oh, no. And he said, no, hey, can you get the ball for us? It rolled over there, and he's on the other side of the court. And the kid looks at me, he's like, nah. And I'm like, oh, no, he didn't. Like, in the youth pastor, he just raised up. Like, all of a sudden, I don't know if you watch WWF, but I, like, got Steiner Brothers on him. And all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, Ric Flair. And I run over there, and I, like, kind of, like, get the kid up in a gentle way. You know, it was a different time back then. Now, you got to, like, say, hey, could you get up and maybe come over here? Back then, you could actually, like, just gently, and by gently, grab a kid and like, hey, we need to have a little chat, Jack. And so I pull him over to the side. I'm like, hey, man, like, this kid, like, you love Jesus. That kid has no idea. He's just coming. He's just glad he's here. And you didn't even get the ball for him. He's like, I didn't want to. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't care if you want to, but I'm trying to talk to him. And he's like, and I'm like, hey, man, like, we just got done learning about Jesus, whatever. And he's like, I said, you just need to, like, get it for him, help serve him, whatever. He's like, I've already been to church. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And he kind of gave this excuse, like, basically, like, I already got my Jesus on. What do you want from me? And I'm like, I want you to actually do what you learned, like, 30 minutes ago. Like, we're not even an hour removed. And you're like, meh. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I pull him over, and, like, not embarrassing him in front of his own friends, but I have a talk like, don't you know the example that you're setting for this guy? Like, you have the opportunity. Like, I didn't ask you to go to Uganda and, like, give up everything. You just needed to get the basketball. And he's like, and you could see his middle school stuff processing, like, how can I get out of this? And you could see, like, I'm not your mom or dad. You ain't doing that mess with me. And we're walking through this, and I'm like, man, when he asks, just go and get the ball. Because when you go and get the ball, what you're telling him about is that that's what people who follow Jesus do. They serve other people. And you know what's really cool about that story is that it doesn't end there for them. You see, that kid that yelled for him to get the ball, they ended up becoming friends. There's always these moments, these stubborn moments that kind of stick with us. And that kid later on that summer ended up making a decision for God, and he got baptized. We used hot tubs there. Now we use a horse trough because that's how we roll, good old Pungo style. And so and he ended up getting baptized the end of that summer and just accepting, you know, what Jesus had done for him. But he talked about that day on the basketball court. And he's like, when you pulled him aside and you talked to him, what that told me is that you guys take this seriously and that you want to make sure you're examples and you don't let anybody just slide. And it was so neat to watch him unpack that at a middle school age, to see. He may never, like, do that with his parents, but there was something about watching a leader and a student interact that made him change his mind about the way that Christians are, because Christians, unfortunately, get a bad rap. And I would like to say that that bad rap hasn't been one that the Christians at large earned, but the truth is, there's a lot of truth in that Christians at large, especially in Western culture, have kind of turned their faith as a spot filled in a calendar, as opposed to something that is the very heartbeat of who they are as a human being. There's this pastor, Francis Chan. He pastored a church out in California and then ended up writing all these books. A super energetic speaker. I've gotten to see him speak a few different times. And he wrote this book called Crazy Love, which we referenced in our mobile app last week, and it's in there again this week if you're using the notes section. And he's kind of one of those guys in this book, Crazy Love. If you ever read this book, it's like, man, his faith in Jesus is awesome. It makes you question whether or not you love God in your existence at all. I'm like, I'm the worst person ever. He's so amazing. ways and I'm awful. Like the whole time I'm reading the book, I'm like, he loves Jesus way more than I do. I just need to give up and quit and work, drive an ice cream truck or something. But it was like it spurred me on to be like, man, my faith needs to be brighter and more vivid. And he says this towards the middle of the book in Crazy Love. He says the core problem in why and when he says we, he's talking about Christians. And so if you're still like checking out faith, you're just not sure about God, you haven't made a decision for him, you haven't been baptized, like you get an off-ramp, you get a pass, and you're like, these Christians are about to get it, and they are. And so here's the problem in why we don't serve others. It isn't the fact that we're lukewarm, or isn't the fact that we might be half-hearted, or isn't it the fact that we might be a stagnant Christian. The crux of it all is why we are this way, and it is because we have an inaccurate view of God. It's just an inaccurate view. Here's the good part. We can unlearn the view that we had and replace that with a healthy view of God. You see, it goes on. It says we see him as a benevolent being who is satisfied when we manage to fit him into our lives into their lives some small way. It looks at this like, oh, I got soccer practice and I got to take the kids here and I got work and I got to go to the gym, got to get get swole and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden and then I'm going to put God right about here for an hour and change. If I got enough sleep and if the kids cooperate in the morning, and trust me, I get it because my wife gets all three of our kids together because I'm already here and I just pray for her all morning because I'm like, you're a saint. I don't know how you do it because during the school year I get them ready and I'm like, pulling what hair I have out as it slowly goes away. And so I get it, the schedule and the things and fitting God in. But here's the deal. God never intended us to fashion our faith in a way where it's plug and play. That here's a little bit of God and I'm good. Or as the kid on the basketball court that I was ministering to, I already went to church. What more do you want from me? He did God a solid by going to church, pounded out God, I was at church, we're all good. And this is what he continues on. He says, we forget that God never had an identity crisis. God's never up there who am I? What am I doing? Oh, John showed up at church. I know I'm God, right? He's not that way. It says he knows that he's great and deserves to be the center of our lives. True faith manifests itself, so because he's the center, he's not one on a list of many, that he is the one that consumes the list. That when I go to work, that I go to work in such a way that honors him. That when I'm at, taking my kids to hip-hop dance class, and I'm the only dad in the lobby of 2-3 dozen moms, that I'm doing that as I honor God. I'm a little disgruntled about that, as you can tell. And so Dad's got to show up, man. And all these different things that we do when I hang out with my friends, I do so in a Christian, loving, honorable way that he consumes my existence, my identity. True faith manifests itself through our, actions. It's the way that we move. It's the way that we breathe. It's the way that we act day in and day out. True faith does not manifest itself because we show up and fill a chair and breathe oxygen in and out and raise our hands as we sing. Now that helps reinforce the core identity of how God made us. But that is not what makes us unique before God. It's done so by the way that we move in him. The way that we take those truths and that love and that grace and pour that out to other people. But far too often as we see situations arise in people's lives, we say, all right, that's you go get the ball. That's not my circus. That's not my monkeys. I'm just going to move on. And we've been looking at the way that Jesus interacts with people. Jesus, during his life and the accounts that took place and that are recorded, not only through the Bible, but through extra biblical writings, are absolutely amazing. And in the story that we're going to look at, if you have a Bible, it's over in Luke chapter 17. The Bible's broken up into Old and New Testament. Luke's in the New Testament of the Bible. And so if you're not familiar with your way around your Bible, you can just turn to the table of contents, look for New Testament, look for Luke, look for chapter 17. And then we're going to be in verse 11 here in a moment. We also give away Bibles for free. You could stop by the Get Connected table in the lobby, pick up a Bible. There's no catch. You don't even have to fill anything out. if you're just like, man, I don't want you people to have my information. I'm not sure if we're on that level yet. We're still blind dating. Like, that's cool. Like, you go pick up a Bible. That's your Bible to keep. You can also download a Bible app on your phone if you're like, I don't even want to pick up a Bible because you might track me or something, which we don't. Like, that's not how this works. Or you may just say, man, I want to download the Forefront Church app because it has every bit of the notes that we're going to go over, all the videos that we'll look at. You're able to take notes in there, book recommendations so you can further along in this, reading plans, because we want to make sure that, like, my kid, that student that was like, I already got my Jesus on, what do you expect from me? That our faith, that our journey is not being sustained by 1 hour here together. And so if you turn over there, over in Luke 17, starting in verse 11, we're catching up with Jesus as he's traveling and he meets some interesting individuals. Starting in verse 11, if you don't have a Bible, it'll be here on the screen. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. I always think it's interesting is the Bible points this out because most of us, if you took a quiz of where all 50 states are, just in the United States, like, it's interesting how many people are like, I have no clue. Where's Wyoming? Like, all this stuff, like, can't place it. And so when these places get mentioned, when I read the Bible, I think, I wonder how many people are just scratching their head going, like, it's somewhere that way. Like, but it's interesting because this isn't just something, it's to continually reaffirm that this account is not just something that was made up on a whim. These are things that truly happened. And they're not only recorded within the context of these books that make up the Bible, but also in writings that are done by men and women and scholars who were not Christians, who were recording the events and times during the era that these were taking place. And so these help reaffirm the fact that these are factual events that went on. Verse 12. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. Leprosy is something that still happens today. It's a flesh-eating disease. If you Google that, you can find it. Now, don't Google with pictures because it's if you have a weak stomach, it's very tough to look at. It will eat away at the skin and at the body, and it's something that happens all over the world. It's something that Mother Teresa, during her ministry, worked through in helping people in that way. During that time, they would be cast out and put in separate villages. They would even be given bells and things, so as they walked through, they could swing much like Monty Python, unclean, bring out your dead, etc. And so they go this, men with leprosy met him. They stood at a distance because they weren't allowed to get too close to him. And they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priests. And they went, and they were cleansed. They didn't even make it to the priest to show them. On their way, they're like, fingers are falling off, things are going, they're not sure if they're going to have a hand, and all of a sudden, like, things are popping back up like a starfish regenerating. Like, I watch, I'm like, that is wicked awesome. Like, it just happened. It is miraculous what is taking place, and as they're doing that, they're like, hey, John, you got your finger back. That's awesome. Hey, man, your nose is totally better. Whoa, your nose is big. I can't believe it. Like, they're walking, and this is happening. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And it says that he was a Samaritan, which Jesus, being a Jew and a Samaritan, this was a big no-no to even get close to one another culturally. And yet he has now thrown himself at the feet of Jesus. He has lost all dignity. He's just saying, I just want to thank you. Maybe you've been at a place in life where you didn't care about the social boundaries and norms, and you just simply were thankful that something miraculous and amazing was happening in your life. You've crossed over that threshold, as Brandon talked about, that beginning and the end. You go, this is the end of this season and time of pain. And he was praising him in a loud voice. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? He's like, I just kind of healed all y'all, and only one came back? Any of us, like, this is like in our house, when our girls, we have 3 girls, and we go out and say we'll go get ice cream. And we'll take them out, and they're like, well, you can hear them, just like, it's like, they love it. Oh, this ice cream's so amazing. Like, my life has changed forever. They'll be like, this is the best day of my life. I'm like, it's ice cream. It's not Disneyland. And by the way, we're not going. And so, like, we'll walk through all this. But we'll prompt them because we're trying to teach them to not be selfish little humans. And so we'll kind of prompt, like, how's the ice cream? Is it good? Like, hoping at some point we'll hear a resounding thank you, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but to condition them in healthy ways so that they will be how's the ice cream? Oh, it's great. Yeah, so good. Oh, and then hear another one, they're, oh man, I'm so full. I just need to go home and nap. And okay, cool. So how, and like prompt them, eventually what I want to say is, your mom, she worked really hard so that she could get her job, so we could have money in the bank, so we could go and get you ice cream. Like, I'm giving them tons of line here so they could do that. They're like, cool, nothing. And I want to just say thank you, like all of it, like at once. In a blue moon, we'll get, yeah, thank you. And like, why is Daddy so angry? Always yelling all the time. No, I'm not yelling all the time. I'm just trying to be crazy. That's what happened. If you're a teenager, you're a kid in here, your parents are cool. Then they had you. You drove them bonkers. You're no longer cool. Threw himself, Jesus' feet. We're not all 10 cleansed. Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, rise and go, your leprosy's back, and all of you are made awful again. No. Rise and go, your faith has made you well. If I'm Jesus in that moment, I go, why serve? Why give back to others? Ungrateful, like they were having body parts and things, like eating up whatever, and they're walking back. John has a hand, Edward has a new nose, like they're walking through the 10 men. All of them are healed and one comes back. Why on earth? Jesus, and if we're sitting here, we go, man, I'm thankful for people that have served and maybe impacted my life, but why would I want to go through what Jesus went through? Because that must feel awful to be able to give back to people and only one comes back. It reminds me of Rebecca. See, Rebecca might not mean much to you, but back in good old 1979, when Jason was still in diapers, for some of you, that makes you feel like I'm old. For others of you, you feel old right now hearing me say that. You see, Rebecca went to Aragona Church off of Witch Duck Road, little small church that my mom and dad went to, and she worked in the nursery. And she played with me and the other kids, and she changed my diaper, which is awkward looking at the picture now, like you've seen my butt. When I was a baby. It's different now. Y'all were weird. And walking through this, the thing is when we hit 1st grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, Rebecca was there all the time, bringing food, caring for us, telling us how much God loved us, and we were awful little human beings. Why on earth anyone would stick it out with us, I still to this day have no idea. But I recently, because the beauty, Facebook can be used for more things than arguing about who's going to win or not win an election. And I hunted Rebecca down. And I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I went to this church and whatever. And immediately, like, she popped back up. She's like, oh, Jason, I remember your mom and your dad and whatever else. And, like, apparently before she answered back, like, she started Facebook stalking me because then she's like, I see your daughters. You have 3 daughters. I'll pray for you. And I'm like, thank you, please. And all this. And we're walking this out. And I started telling her back and forth as we're going back and forth. I was like, hey, I'm a pastor now. And I don't know why you stuck with it from birth to 5th grade. Like, you walked it out and you cared for us and we were awful and you're amazing. Like, what was that? And she's like, oh, you're a pastor. And she ended up going and watching the sermons. Oh, and she was very complimentary. I was like, you're kind. I'm not that good. I promise. You should see the faces of the people that have to listen to me. And I was like, what was it? Like, why did you stick with honoring other people and giving of yourself that were ungrateful? And she's like, I did it because God called me to do it. He tells us to. So I used to pray over you guys when we would play or even in changing a diaper that God would do something amazing in your lives. And I'm reading this stuff through Facebook and just welling up. I'm like, you cared enough. I was like, I don't know what it's worth. Like, I kind of went a long way around to get to that place. But I think those prayers over a really ugly baby didn't take away the ugliness, but God did something great in the rest of it. And like, I have this beautiful wife and these daughters and this church, and I'm alive. God gives me life. And those prayers worked. See, because Rebecca knew this truth. Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that openly profess the name. And do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased. See, she got the same premise that echoes in this life, that this life is not about us. From the parking lot people to the guys in the back running sound, to these guys that practice all week individually, to the person standing at the door who smiles at you, even if they've had a bad week, to the person helping you with check-in, even if a computer system goes down, to the adults that are back there caring for your kids, some of which are angels, some of which you know. To the people that come out in the evening to work with those middle schoolers, those high schoolers. She got the very same truth that is very plain throughout the narrative of the story of God. There's a guy by the name of John Burke that wrote an amazing book called Mud and the Masterpiece. It was then renamed a couple years ago. Shares this. He says, when Jesus encountered people, he had spiritual vision to see the river of hurt and pain flowing beneath the surface of those who drink and drug to numb the anger or to hide the loneliness. He saw beneath the surface of people who get entangled in degrading relationships because they fear being alone. He could see through the shield of those who shut out everyone and shut everyone out, terrified of being hurt again. He continues on. He understood why people work themselves to death trying to prove that they're worth something. Jesus could see that beneath all our adult pretense and posturing, hidden under the sands of time, are just little boys and girls, let down and confused, hurt and angry, wounded and afraid, rebelling and running from the only one who can ultimately make it better. I would say the only one that can make us whole. You see, she got this truth because she watched it in the very life of Jesus. And we see it through the lifeblood of our church. As people are impacted and then turn around and say, because I have been impacted, I will then help others be changed with his love and with his grace. See, because we're supposed to carry each other's burdens. Shares this over in Galatians in the New Testament of the Bible. Carry each other's burdens and in this way fulfill the law of Christ. This thing for burdens here talks about a heavy load. Something that someone cannot bear on their own. I got a very good visual picture of this. Our church is connected to a village that we've been serving for over 8 years in Vietnam. And the last time that I was over there, I was able to get very close with the water buffalo that are there. The first year I tried to ride one and it hissed at me. I didn't know that they could hiss, but they did, and I was terrified, and then said I would never get close. And then a few years later, God was able to take photos and ride them. He is unimpressed, and so is the dog. But I think it's amazing. And we're watching them, and they would watch them plow the field and make the work easy because no man could do it on his own. See, we're to pick up each other's burdens. But for many of us, we would say that, I'm just going to pray really hard because I don't know what to do. I don't know how to give back. I don't know enough. My schedule is too busy. I just don't know how I could impact other people's lives with God's love. I'm still trying to understand God's love. But God has a precedent for those who say, I will follow you, Jesus. He says, as you follow me, do as I do. And one of the commands in that is that we would give of ourselves to others, out in the community, in our families, and within the beautiful community that God gives us as a church. But it's interesting that people, and I did this for years, would pray it away until they get this revelation or this vision or any of these things. And I wrote this down. We were in a class yesterday to try to process this. For many of us, we need to stop praying, God, give me clarity, or God, give me an answer, and instead do what God has already said. Because God said, serve. Well, I don't know if I should serve. I really got to pray on that. And God's like, no, you don't need to pray about that. I already told you. I don't know if I should really love my neighbor because he's been really mean. No, God cleared that up. Well, I don't know. I was thinking about cheating on my spouse. It's like, no, God's pretty clear about what to do there. He shared with us that. Well, I just don't. And all these things. Instead of praying that, God already said it and calls us to do and serve others. The outcome of serving others is out of your control and my control. God will handle that. What's your job? What's my job? As we live this existence that is not about us but about other people, it says, show up and love others. Well, what if I'm not good enough? What if I don't know enough? What if I don't know what to say? God's got it. Thumbs up. Well, what if I show up and it turns into Lord of the Flies and all the kids surround me and whatever, and it'd be like, do they know? Because if your name's not mom and your name's not dad or whoever the caregiver is, you immediately skyrocket in their thinking. They're like, I don't want to listen to them, but you're not them, and so I'll listen to you, and you'll say the same things that the caregiver, the mom, or the dad says, and when they say it, they're like, oh, and you say it, and they're like, oh. And then the mom or dad come up and go, how did you do that? What did you do? I just told them that God loved them. They're like, what? I told them that too, and they're like pulling my hair out, their hair out, and it's going crazy. They try to burn down the house. You did it, and all of a sudden they come home, and they're loving and kind. I don't understand. Because there's a difference when people of influence pull a kid aside on a basketball court when another kid needs Jesus. You say, hey, listen, you said this. I need you to do it. Because that kid's life is at stake by your example. Because you don't have to go to Uganda. You just need to get the ball and pick it up and throw it to him. Bottom line is that you and I are called in this existence to serve others. You're called to faithfulness, not to outcomes. I love the way this letter was written in from one of our volunteers. It says, I've been working in children's ministry here at Forefront since 2004. I didn't grow up in church and was unsure I could provide in working with kids on Sunday mornings. I figured I would step out of what was comfortable, and by that, the person meant staying anonymous on Sunday mornings. Come in, sit, stand, raise your arms, clap, whatever, laugh at the pastor's dumb jokes, and leave. For me, I need to step out and give it a try. I've worked with a few different age groups, and I feel confident in saying I found the right place for me with kids I get to be with on Sunday morning. Children's ministry is noisy and filled with energy. It can be packed with little people, but that is really the best part. I get to have the chance to love someone without strings attached. It's like when someone invites you out to coffee, you're like, is this going to be a good coffee, bad coffee? What do you want from me? What do you want to do? Like, is it just going to be life exchange? Are you going to drop a bomb on me? Are you going to ask me to help you move? Because that's what, whatever the case may be, not with kids. I get to talk, sing, dance, play games all the while about God and talk to them about God's love and how he created us. I never feel like I have to have all the exact words to say, even though we have an awesome curriculum that tells us exactly what we can say. I simply tell the truth and speak what I know to do. Kids have worth. They're loved by an amazing God who loves to laugh and have fun just like them. The best part of any Sunday morning is walking in and seeing the kids that are all in my different classes and have them smile and say hi when they see me. The longer I've stayed in children's ministry, the more smiles, high fives, and hugs and hellos I get on a Sunday morning in the lobby than my friends. In a world full of people that can say no to giving your life away to others, my hope is that you would choose to be a Crystal. My hope is that you would choose to be a Rebecca. Because I can tell you, from a kid who just grew up surfing and hanging out at the beach, who didn't look like he had a trajectory towards God, stand here today to tell you it's because somebody prayed over changing my diaper that changed my life. No matter where you find yourself in life, you can do the same. for someone else. Why don't you pray with me? God, I thank